Hello everyone, and welcome to my first official tutorial video for the CEF Mastery Super Screener and Interactive Report. In this particular video, this is more or less pretty much a quick start guide to help newcomers quickly start to navigate the CEF Mastery Super Screener to the investment style that is most suitable to them. Now, what we're really going to do here is basically expand on the live walkthrough that I did on the two-part demonstration video where I showed you my routine on how I find the safest, highest yielding closed-end funds. But before we go into that, I want to offer you quick tip number one. If ever, should you ever see a fund with a series of hashtags in its columns, even if it meets the criteria of final score, and even though you can't tell, it meets the estimated monthly distributions remaining category as well, use extreme caution. I'm not here to tell you what to or what not to invest in, but these particular funds require extra scrutiny. Most often, you'll encounter these funds in situations where the distribution is semi-annual. The reason this occurs is because when a semi-annual fund pays both of its semi-annual distributions within the same 1 6-month period, then the other 6-month period reflects no distribution paid. And as a result, it gives the appearance that the fund has an infinite number of monthly distributions available, which is definitely not the case. I hope to alleviate this problem in the future by replacing semi-annual funds with more frequent payers like quarterly and monthly. But even then, that doesn't completely resolve the issue. As you can see here with the fund NDP, it is a quarterly payer and it has quite a few columns with hashtags across their fields. And as a result, there is no score or final score. These particular funds you should be extremely cautious of. Anyway, moving on to tip number 2. If you watched my two-part demo, if you haven't, the link is in the description below. I'll walk through my routine on how I use the CEF Mastery Super Screener. And in that particular demonstration, I mentioned that my preference is using the highest current yield as my starting point. But your preferences might be a little different than mine. You, for example, might be looking for a fund with the highest discount, or the lowest return of capital percentage, or a fund with the lowest distribution yield to NAV. Again, notice all the asterisks. 2 of the funds are semi-annual, and then there's the NDP again. So you would start from the fund below that. Or your preference might be the fund with the lowest debt to equity, or the lowest portfolio turnover rate, or the fund with the highest final score. Okay, so tip number 2 is any column header that you press will automatically sort the column to the condition that is most favorable for that column. For example, if you click on debt to equity, it will start with the funds that have the lowest amount of debt to equity. If you're looking for the current discount or premium, it will start with the funds with the lowest discounts. If you're looking for funds with the highest yield, clicking on the header will start with the highest yields. If you're looking for funds with the highest final score, clicking on the final score header brings you the funds with the highest scores. Tip number 3, conditional formatting. Every cell in the CEF Mastery Super Screener is a valuable piece of real estate. Every cell on the CEF Mastery Super Screener has a job to do. Every color in every cell that you see on the CEF Super Screener is not based on an arbitrary number, but based on a condition. That condition can be based on something so simple as a yield might be in question because the fund has a negative number of estimated monthly distributions remaining. Or it can be as sophisticated as this little gem right here, where the cell is filled in green and the number is blue. This particular format requires a fund to meet at least 9 specific criteria. I'm not going to go into those 9 criteria in this video right now. It's too lengthy. But let me just say that I would be more surprised if one of these funds or to cut their distributions before even the highest ranked closed-end fund. Now, with all this information staring you right in the face, how are you supposed to be able to interpret it? If you go back up to the column headers and you move it up and down, you'll notice there are two separate cursors. Clicking the little hand sorts the column. Clicking the little cross, and it brings up a description of what the conditions mean for that particular field. For example, as I mentioned just here, a cell with a light green fill and blue font is the strongest yield determined by multiple factors. Those are the 9 specific criteria that I mentioned. Yellow equals fund paying distributions with negative accumulated earnings. And basically all that means, as I mentioned earlier, if the yield is filled in yellow, it's most likely going to be correlated with a negative estimated monthly distribution remaining field. Other useful headers to point out would be distribution yield to NAV. Here, green means distribution lower than reported total income, which is good. That means the fund made more income than it paid out in distribution. Red equals distribution higher than reported total income, which means they did not make enough money to cover the distribution. Underlined equals current yield is greater than 5%, and the distribution yield to NAV is lower than 5%. Another useful header is return of capital as a percentage of distribution. This is the percentage of distribution categorized as return of capital. An asterisk represents no return of capital reported on semi-annual report. This is significant because many funds report return of capital on an annual report only and not on their semi-annual report. Bold, double, underline equals a history of return of capital, which is confirmed by the column next to it, which is the annual average return of capital. Anyway, I'll let you explore these on your own. Every column header has one, just about. And this will take us now into tip number 4, filtering. Filtering is a feature that I can't take credit for. It's a standard feature built into Office 365 and actually most recent versions of Excel, but it is certainly a feature that we can take full advantage of. Filtering allows you to drill down to closed-end funds that meet your exact criteria, and you can locate all of these funds without even having to leave the pivot table tab. To start honing into your funds using the filter feature, you would start selecting the columns that are most significant to you. Let's say, for example, funds that have increased in NAV percentage change since they last reported. You would go to the column header and you see this little arrow. When you click on the arrow, it brings up a drop-down menu. Right away, you notice you can sort, which is also the function that clicking on the column header has. And it also gives you the added feature of sorting by color cell or even by font color, which we'll go over that in a little while. But getting back to our stated goal of finding funds that have increased in NAV percentage change since the fund last reported, you would click on the number filters. And as you can see, there's a whole host of different criteria that you can use. But for the purpose of our example, we're going to click on greater than. And since we're looking for funds that have improved in NAV percentage change, all we enter is 0. And when you click OK, you notice the slight shift in the amount of funds that were presented. And if you scroll down, you'll notice that all of the funds that are visible are funds that have a NAV percentage increase since their last report. Now let's take it one step further and say that you're only interested in funds that yield above 7%. So we go back again to the greater than. Microsoft Excel represents 100% as the number 1. So if you would like to find funds that yield greater than 7%, that number format would be represented by 0.07 for 7%. Then you click OK. And if you notice, there's a very short list of funds remaining. Now you can use the filter feature on every single column to refine your search even further. Let's say you, for example, you would like a fund with an estimated debt to equity percentage of less than 0.20, 20%. And you see the list gets even shorter. And then, of course, once you find your final candidates, you can click on Final Score to sort them from the highest rank to the lowest. To clear your filter selections, just make sure that your cursor is in one of the filtered fields. Then you click on Home, go to the Sort and Filter icon, and hit Clear, and it brings you back to the full screen of all your available closed-end funds. Now, if you recall, we mentioned earlier in the video that there are certain funds that meet certain criteria, and because of conditional formatting, they are represented in particular ways. For example, the blue font with the green fill are funds that meet 9 specific criteria, which we will go into in another video. But let's say, for example, that you are only interested in finding those particular funds. You could go to the filter feature. Under filter by color, you can choose the filter by cell color. And as you can see, there are 3 different colors and also a no fill, which is white. And you can filter by font color. Now in this particular case, you could choose either the light green shaded or the font color. We'll go with font color. And it brings back every fund that meets those 9 specific criteria. Again, going back to the Home tab, making sure that your cursor is in a cell that has been filtered. Then you go to the Sort and Filtered icon and hit Clear, and it brings back all your funds. If you go over here to Distribution Type and Frequency, you could also click on Filter, Filter by Color, Blue. Blue funds are tax-exempt funds. Some are state-exempt, some are federal exempt, some are both. You have to go to the specific website for the fund for more details. Let's narrow down our tax-exempt funds to funds that were able to cover their distributions by net investment income only. So we go to the number filter, and we would click on the greater than or equal to, which since 100% is represented by the number 1, you enter a 1, click OK. All the tax-exempt funds that were able to meet their distribution obligations by net investment income only. And of course, you could go over to the final score header and sort by final score. There's one little caveat that I would like to point out for this particular screen right here. I want you to notice that every fund that has made their distribution obligation completely by net investment income also has an extremely large amount of leverage to make those obligations. The reason I point that out is because highly leveraged funds experience extreme volatility and major market swings. So when the market's going down fast, you can imagine what's going to happen to the fund. Just a little footnote for you to be aware of if you're not already. Anyway, that will be the conclusion of this video. I hope you found it helpful. Please hit the like button if you found it useful. Hit the subscribe button if you're new. Thanks for watching. I have a fantastic video coming out next. CEF Mastery Super Screener has been live for about 2 years now. But can I prove in just 2 years CEF Mastery Super Screener has outperformed the market over the long term? Maybe I'm biased, but I think it's going to be a pretty fascinating video, and I hope you'll tune in. Thanks again, and many happy returns.